Yes, you are seeing correctly. Another episode of the Real Forno Show here on Vikings First and SKOL. And tonight we are
The
talking with
doubleheader.
Justin Day. You know what? You're interrupting me, Dave. I don't appreciate that. We are talking with Justin Day from Purple and Gold for Days, and we are going to have some fun. Dr. Proto, yes, go check it out. I had a special guest interview with Connor Rogers from NBC Sports and Pro Football Focus earlier today at 3:30 Central. You can check that out on demand. Tonight, we're going to have a fun roundtable discussion about the Minnesota Vikings. Should be a good time. Welcome to the Real Forno Show.
Welcome to the Real Forno Show. Managing editor of the USA Today's Vikings Wire. Betting and college football analysis for the Fantasy Points website. Publisher of Substack Run and Shooter. Host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, as well as a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Bada bing, bada boom. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a second Real Forno Show here on this glorious Monday afternoon. Yes, Odie is alive and healthy. He is doing good, even though it takes apparently 3.5 hours to clot a claw. You live, you learn. But somehow the dog just did not hurt, and now he's playing with his stuffed dog. Welcome, as always, you have in the bottom right corner today is producer Dave, and that is because we have a guest on here today, host of Purple and Gold for Days. His name is Justin Day. Justin, how are you?
I am good. Good to be here. You know, it's the off season, but there's never an off season when it comes to talking Vikings football. So I'm glad to be on here. See some familiar faces in the building already with Dr. Proto and Mary and Davey Change, to be example. If you haven't already, y'all hit that like button and support the channel. Let's get this chat hopping here tonight. Throw any questions you want. Let's have some fun.
Bingo, bango, bongo. And there is some interesting things kind of going on in the landscape of the Minnesota Vikings. We just had rookie minicamp this past weekend, and I am convinced that Jordan Addison is going to be in the Mighty Mouse Hall of Fame. Just kind of seeing how he continues to wow in the landscape of being a wide receiver, because some guys just get it. How are you sitting with this draft class, Justin? We're just over 2 weeks out, and we finally had some time to let things settle. What are your overall thoughts here?
Well, like a lot of Vikings Nation, I really was hoping they would make a trade up to get an Anthony Richardson. We all knew from the get-go that was pretty much a long shot at best. Heard the reports that the only guy they wanted was Bryce Young. But having said that, on my live draft show that I did with a few other creators, I was very, very happy when it was Jordan Addison that was the pick. He was my second choice at wide receiver behind only Jackson Smith and Jigba. But what I like about the idea of Jefferson and Addison together is they're not the Batman and Robin that Carter and Moss were, where they each had specific roles that they were outstanding at. These guys are more like when you have a superhero crossover with Flash and Green Arrow, where you've got two superheroes in the building that can do everything. You're never going to line up Randy Moss in the slot, for example, but you can line up Jefferson and Addison pretty much anywhere on the field out of 2 wide receiver sets, 3 wide receiver sets. So to me, I'm really, really happy with this pick. I'm really glad that they said, you know what? I know offense was the strength of our team and our defense has a lot of weaknesses, but when you have a guy that can step right in to either 2 or 3 wide receiver packages with Justin Jefferson and KJ Osborne to take a very good offense and potentially make it great, I was thrilled with the pick. Thrilled with it.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And one of the things that is kind of concerning with the Jordan Addison pick, and I don't necessarily know how concerning it is, but it at least has to be talked about, and that is his size. Wide receivers just don't have a track record at 173 pounds, and it's not like he's 5'9", 173. He's 6 foot. He doesn't. You can tell he gets bullied on the outside by cornerbacks at times, and getting knocked off his axis is honestly a bigger deal with a guy like him than necessarily as somebody else, because of how precise and timing his routes are. Like when you kind of look at his frame, what are your what are your main takeaways? Like, how concerned are you?
A little. I mean, he's going to need to get onto the Golden Corral diet, as was mentioned at one point. But jokes aside, yeah, Kevin O'Connell's going to have to use him in ways to maybe put him in motion a little bit more so that he isn't able to be jammed off the line of scrimmage as often. Obviously, you can't put the same wide receiver in motion on every play, but use him in ways. And again, it's an unfair comparison to say guys like Percy Harvin or guys like Tyreek Hill, because none of them are the exact comp for him, but I think you can find ways. Yes, he's going to need to put on some weight. There's no discussion about that. He's not going to be able to survive in the NFL at 170 pounds, but I do think that if he starts off, regardless of what Kevin O'Connell says on draft night about him being a day one starter or not, the fact of the matter is he's going to start off as the team's number 3 wide receiver until he can prove that he deserves to be on the field more than KJ Osborne. And KJ is in the last year of his deal, so he's not just going to sit back and say, yeah, go ahead, rookie, you take 2, I'll take 3. So it'll be interesting enough to see, but I think there's ways that, and that's what Kevin O'Connell gets paid for, is to be able to utilize his players to their strengths and try to cover up as many of their weaknesses as possible.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating to kind of see how he ends up getting used. Dave, where are you at with his size? Because as much as we talked about Jordan Addison, I don't think you and I have ever had the conversation about his size.
Well, you know how I feel about small football players. However, he is 6 feet tall, coming in at what, 175?
173.
173. Believe it or not, I weighed that in high school. Same height, same deal. He will.
I haven't weighed 173 since I was 14, and it might have been earlier than that, probably 13.
But he will put on some bulk. Now, of course, football players lose that over the season, but he will put it on. It'll be good stuff with sports science guys that are in the building. They'll know how to bring up his weight, put it on properly, where to put it on. That will help. But as long as he is elusive and slippery, he can get it done. It's not like we're asking him to play interior guard, right? So I'm not as worried about it at wide receiver as I would be if it was almost any other position. But I think
I'm going to be honest. I would love to see a 173-pound left tackle just to see your brain melt. That would be some all-time audio video right there, just to watch Dave see Nick Bosa take on a 173-pound tackle. Like, I am all in for that.
When I played Pop Warner, we had kids that big.
Yeah,
that was Pop Warner.
That reminds me back in the day in the Metrodome when the late, great Reverend Reggie White was lined up one-on-one with the Reverend Chris Carter and just chucked him 5 yards to the side and ended up sacking your guy Warren Moon. When you're talking about it.
I'm 90% sure that was first quarter 1994 Sunday Night Football on, of all networks, TNT. I watched that game last summer. Reggie White and Sean Jones as your edge rushers in a 4-3 is disgusting and should be illegal.
Yes. Reggie White... I'm sorry. I know that there's been a handful of people that actually want to say that there's one or two other guys, but no, he's the GOAT when it comes to pass rush. Oh, well, him and Lawrence Taylor. I'll give him those two are on their own Mount Rushmore.
Reggie White, in my opinion, is on the Mount Rushmore of best football players of all time.
Yeah, he's right there.
He's Dave. He has almost 200 sacks. He can play all 4 positions on the defensive line and made a massive impact.
Him play. Both at Philadelphia, and then when he went up to the team from Wisconsin.
Yeah. Well, best player I've ever seen on defense. I'll say that much.
Speaking of good players on defense, Justin, you put out a video just a little while ago talking about Quinnen Williams.
Williams.
Tell us about that.
Well, When I see the New York Jets, and granted, and I use this line in the video, they've spent all of their time trying to adopt a new child that they've forgotten about the golden child that they already have in their efforts to acquire the Wicked Witch of the Midwest and in Aaron Rodgers, that somehow, some way, they've got not only a very good defensive tackle, not only a Pro Bowl defensive tackle, but an all-pro defensive tackle in Williams, who was taken number 3 overall in the 2019 draft. So just a few picks ahead of our own TJ Hawkinson. So this is his 5th-year option, and he's looking to get extended like any other player would, particularly at his level. He's seen guys like Deron Payne. He's seen guys like Dexter Lawrence from the Giants get contracts commensurate to their abilities, and he's just kind of sitting there on his $10 million 5th-year rookie option saying, hey, what's going on here? To me, it's a long shot at best. But if the Jets are that serious about not signing that guy, how many problems and how many holes on defense would that guy fill? We haven't had an interior pass rush probably since Linval Joseph. So take that back a few years. We've seen over the last 3 seasons how terrible this defense is, both against the run and absolutely minimal interior pass rush. That, to me, if this guy somehow, some way becomes available, or if the Jets are saying, you know what, yeah, it's a high price tag. $22 to $28 million a year is no joke for a defensive tackle. I mean, that's Aaron Donald money. But to me, if the Jets are just going to kind of dink and dunk around with this guy, I say, Kwesi, get on the phone and find out what it would take to get this guy here, because my goodness, yes, we just shipped off Za'Darius Smith, so we lost a little bit of our first half of the season pass rush, not so much in the second half, as we all know. But, yeah, I'm just saying, to me, I don't understand. That would be like if it's this time next year and we haven't signed Justin Jefferson to an extension, and we were just dinking around and not getting it done. I don't know what the deal is, why they haven't gotten it done, but I say call him up and see what it would take to get him here. Guy's a monster.
Tyler,
the one thing that I don't know if he's a fit, and when you kind of look at what this defensive line is going to be, it's going to be like a standard 3-4. You're going to have a 4-eye-5 technique on each side, and you're going to have a nose tackle. I don't necessarily think that you're going to get the proper value for what Quinnen Williams brings to you in how this defense is designed to play football, especially if you don't have a nose tackle, which the Vikings, in my opinion, currently don't. The only one they have on the roster, they have 2 nose tackles on the roster. One, I don't know if is making the team, and 2, I don't even think Khyiris Tonga is going to play nose tackle. That's Tonga and Calvin Avery. I love the idea. I love the enthusiasm, and I think I'm spot on with you, Justin, 100%. I think he's a tremendous football player, true game record from the interior. I don't think that it would be a great investment for the Vikings for the sole fact that I don't think he's going to be used to his max ability here. And I think he being in that 4-3 in New York, I think, is his best fit, because he's going to be asked to be like that 1A gap shooter, and he's going to be able to really kind of take advantage of some of those things on the interior. Like, I kind of look at Kevin Williams. Like, when Kevin Williams is here, right, like, they're a very, very, very similar players. They're great gap shooters. They're really quick and penetration. But if you put them too far outside, Williams started as a defensive end. He played relatively well, but he wasn't long for that position. They just kind of had a long jam at DT, and they wanted to get him on the field, and they moved him inside the second they could. Now he's a borderline Hall of Famer. And I think if you put Williams too far outside and you line him up over that tackle, I think you're really losing a lot of what makes him special. And therefore, like, when you account for all the capital to acquire him and then all the capital you're going to have to pay him, I don't know if it's necessarily going to give you the return on your investment that you're hoping for. Or, like, if this guy was in a Mike Zimmer defense, I would probably give Saturn to go get him. But in this defense, I have real concerns that he might not be a great fit.
Do you take into account, and again, you can only play the cards that you're dealt with, but do you take into account that Flores might only be here for a year? I get it that when he was asked the question, are you going to run a 4-3 or a 3-4? And he says, well, it depends on my opponent and all that good stuff. But if you had an opportunity to get a player like that, do you forego the opportunity just based on your current defensive coordinator and the current system you're running? I get what you're saying, and you're 100% right. He's better suited for the 4-3. I just think that he's that good to where you could still get he would be an upgrade, in my opinion, over anything that we've got right now, even in a 3-4, with the possibility that you might not be running a 3-4 defense this time next year. Just what do you think on that?
I think let's answer this in two parts. First part, you don't hire a coordinator based on the personnel you have, but you don't acquire personnel that doesn't fit your coordinator in as far as like giving up assets. Now, if this was the NFL draft and Quinnen Williams fell to 23, I'd take him 10 out of 10, and I don't think twice, just because the talent's too good and you kind of figure it out. But this isn't just spending one first-round pick. You're giving up capital and then giving him a likely record-setting contract, and that's where I think things, as far as like a team-building perspective, get a little muddied. I think that's honestly the best way to put it. Like, you could bring him in, he'd be your best defensive lineman, and you'd figure out a way to utilize him. But I would struggle with seeing his 100th percentile outcome ever being reached playing in a defensive system like this. And to me, I can't say that that's worth everything you're going to have to give up and give him, because that's a lot of capital.
What would the draft compensation be? I mean, I looked at the TJ Hawkinson deal and I'm thinking, okay, that's going to be somewhere around the starting point when you're talking about, a top 10 pick in the last year of his rookie deal. Obviously, Hawkinson is a Pro Bowl player, but he's not an all-pro player. I mean, would you say that what we gave up for Hawkinson would be around what we'd have to give up, or would it have to be more than that? Or what do you – just help me out with that one real quick.
It's a first plus. Historic precedent – DeForest Buckner went for pick 14. And I think Quinnen Williams is around that level. I think he's a little better. Plus, instead of being like a fringe top 10 pick, I think he was like 7th or 8th off the board. Quinnen Williams was not Buckner. Williams was 3rd.
I'm sorry. Williams was 3rd. Yeah. Sorry.
Buckner was like 7th or 8th. So the perception, and then the 49ers just went and drafted Javon Kinlaw because they knew they'd be able to get him. And they kind of made that happen. I think the Jets would want to keep him because I think they view him, especially with how important 3 technique is in that defense, as a cornerstone. I think they're going to ask for at least a first round pick and probably like a 3rd. Like, to me, that's a lot. And that's where I really have my hesitations.
And you're not going to do it when we're still looking to the future for the quarterback of the future. I don't think they're going to spend that sort of capital just to get an outstanding tackle.
I'll say this. If Quinnen Williams was Vince Wilfork, I'd give up next year's first right now.
There's that.
No, like a nose tackle a great nose tackle solves a lot of your problems on defense. And it makes the job easier for guys like Jordan Hicks, Brian Asamoah, because all of a sudden you are controlling both A-gaps with one guy, and that's pivotal with the 3-4. You look at some of the more successful 3-4s of the past couple decades, like the Steelers had Casey Hampton. I'm so tired, I'm losing my mind. The Patriots had Wilfork, like I said. Sam Adams with the Baltimore Ravens when they were elite.
Tony Sturgis,
Yeah, it made such a difference to have that big guy who could be a 2-gapper. And I think that might be a more, like, if he was a 2-gap kind of guy, I'd pay that price. But I guess we'll just have to we'll just have to be on separate sides, and that's okay.
Well,
no, it absolutely is.
I don't think it's going to happen. It's just one of those reckless speculations, as your friends on Score North say, Tyler, that is interesting. Mm-hmm. That's why I brought it up. And if the viewers have missed Justin's video on that, I suggest you go check it out after this.
After.
Yes. Hey, looks like Rap's join us.
What's up, Rap? How you doing?
Purple Pocket Podcast. Now, that brings us, we're sitting there talking about possible trades and what it gets. What's your view of the salary cap situation, and how long is it going to take to get the Vikings healthy in that respect?
Well, it's a mess. This just in, breaking news, and it's not going to get fixed in 1 or 2 years. It didn't get broken in 1 or 2 years. I'll take
Mm-hmm.
people back in the time machine when Teddy Bridgewater's knee blew up. You were able to trade for Sam Bradford, or I think he's making like 13 million. Now, mind you, 13 million in 2016 isn't the same as what it is now. But with all that being said, and they didn't blink. Why? Because they had a lot of players on rookie contracts. They had taken their salary cap seriously. They were very conservative fiscally. They weren't spending like drunken sailors, so to speak. And after 2017, when they got to the NFC Championship game with Case Keenum and made the choice to bring in Kirk Cousins, since that point in time, they've been spending to the max to try to keep this Kirk Cousins experiment and window open. Let me be clear. I'm not saying that it's only Kirk Cousins before anybody draws that one on me. Obviously, you had to re-sign Thielen and Diggs. You eventually re-signed Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks and Harrison Smith and eventually Dalvin Cook. Guess what? When you re-sign all of your same players to higher contracts than what they were before, that means you have less to bring in free agents. So you've been shopping in the Walmart, discount clearance rack for the last 3.5 years, so to speak, outside of the TJ Hawkinson trade. And you've been pushing money down the road. You've been doing void years left and right. You've been doing extensions just to get salary cap compliant. A good GM isn't somebody that can find a way to get players in and be compliant. A good GM is one that manages the cap so that you don't have to make moves like constantly adding void years. So swing that over to now it's Kwesi instead of Rick Spielman. Rick Spielman just spent like a drunken sailor because his job was on the line, and that was the directive that he was given by the owners. So Kwesi wasn't going to be able to clean up that 5-year accumulation of bad contracts and void years in 1 or 2 off seasons. It's going to take some time. You cut Adam Thielen and you took a $13 million dead cap hit, and they decided not to spread it out over 23 and 24. They said, no, let's get rid of all of this now. We still haven't seen the final numbers on the Za'Darius Smith and how much dead money that they were going to have to eat and how much of the contract they picked up for Cleveland. But right now, here's the thing. Right now, next season, they've got about $57 million in dead cap hits that could potentially hit. You got 28.5 possibly in Kirk Cousins. You've got about 9 with Harrison Smith. You've got around 11 with Danielle Hunter. You've actually got $6 million dead for Davenport. They signed him to a 1-year, $13 million deal. They're only going to get charged 7 of it this year and 6 of it next year. So they've got a lot of dead cap hits that they still have to wipe off the books. And if you're going to go with the no, we're staying competitive. We're not going to trade off all of our pieces and take a year off where we know we're only going to win 4 or 5 games. If that's the premise you're going under, then this is the consequence of that, you can't wipe off your dead salary cap hits in 1 or 2 seasons. So realistically, you're not going to have a healthy salary cap until at least 2024, maybe even 2025.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. It's definitely been a process, and I think they're doing a lot of really good things. I think one of the things that's really fascinating about how Kwesi Adofo-Mensah is approaching this whole thing is so many guys are on 1 or 2 year deals.
Yep.
And like the amount of players that expire next year, the Vikings will have 37 free agents in 2024. Yeah. And they'll have even more in 2025. They are keeping ultimate flexibility as far as, hey, do we want to keep this guy long term? I don't know. Well, you don't have to worry about it because they're not committing to a lot of guys. Now they're going to commit to Jefferson. They're eventually going to commit to Darisaw. And they're going to make sure that they give those guys ample contracts. But they're keeping that ultimate flexibility open because I don't necessarily know Kwesi Adofo-Mensah knows what he wants to do with this team. And that's not a bad thing. He understands that the data is very incomplete and he wants more complete data before he ends up forking over big boy contracts. A lot of times what you see general managers doing is rookie way outperforms his contract. They give him all the money to almost compensate for what he's done and not necessarily what he's going to do. And that's when you get a Dalvin Cook. And Thielen he hit his 30s and his athleticism just went kablooey. That happens. For some guys, it happens at 35. Thielen started happening at 31, 32. Like, he didn't get an unfair contract for kind of what he was producing, but it just went. The biggest mistake was ended up they restructured him, and that's what kind of crippled us this year. But it is what it is. I'm very intrigued to kind of see how he continues to approach his team, because he's keeping the door wide open for literally everything. There is nothing off the table right now, and that to me is what makes this the ultimate reality show.
Speaking of that, you mentioned Cook. Cook obviously plays into the salary cap stuff. How, Justin, do you see the Dalvin Cook situation playing out?
Unless he goes back on what he said from day one of free agency, which is I'm not taking a pay cut, I just don't see how he's on this team next year. I just don't. When you have Dalvin Cook and Alexander Madison, and Madison was a free agent, I don't think there's any scenario.
And we just lost Justin to the dreaded sun spots, solar storms, whatever it is. What's your take on Cook there, Tyler? How do you think the Vikings are going to do this?
I have no idea. I really don't. I don't think he's going to play with this team next year, but here's the thing. They have stayed steadfast. They kept him, and I honestly think because of how the rest of his contract guarantees, it's smart to keep him. Try and keep him for as long as you can until you can work out a deal, or you can cut him with zero penalty as long as it's before week 1 of the season, because a lot of these veteran contracts, that salary doesn't vest until week 1, and I think that was really smart to have that in the deal. Now, the shoulder surgery did make it so he got an extra $2 million guaranteed. Whether that was agent-driven to, hey, just wait until X time to get your surgery so you can get an extra $2 million, I don't know. But it would be a smart play because he couldn't pass the physical at the beginning of the league year. Got an extra $2 million. Good for him. And that should continue to help set him and his family up for the rest of their lives. When you look at the player and the financial aspect, the Vikings cannot pay him the $14 million cap hit for what he's bringing, but he would be an asset to the offense. And that's where I think a lot of people haven't talked about. He'd be the best running back on the team, and he would be an asset to the offense. He'd be able to help, and he'd be average 4.5 yards a carry and help move the sticks. But at that price, it's not going to happen. And I don't know what the resolution is. It's probably a cut at this point. But I think because of what the contract is and how the money vests, there's a reason why he's still on the team. They're trying to get assets back for him.
Do you know if that $2 million is in offset language, that if they do cut him, that will get offset if and when he signs with a different team? Do you know by chance? I was trying to find it and I couldn't find it one way or the other.
That'll come out if he signs with a new team, is my guess.
Okay.
Well, that's guaranteed money, and I think the Vikes are on the hook for that if he signs with a team.
What Justin's saying, though, is let's say he signs, hypothetically, we cut him 1 year, $6 million with his new team. Then the Vikings would be off the hook for that $2 million if it's an offset language, saying if you sign, your first $2 million after the minimum can come off of our books. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the reasons why, even though we're in this era of structured contracts where you get a slot, Joey Bosa held out for multiple weeks because he's like, no, I don't want that offset language in my deal. If you cut me for whatever reason, I don't want to lose money. And the Chargers fought him on it, and they ended up coming to some sort of agreement. That's a real thing in a lot of contracts, and it's a way to potentially save money on the salary cap.
So having said all that, as it stands now, you cut him, you save $9 million. You trade him, you save $11 million. You're going to take a 3.1 dead hit for the 2024 season, one way or the other. But at this point, I remember Doogie saying that there was an offer made, or at least some interest. If they end up cutting him and get nothing for return on him, even if it is something as little as a 6th-round pick next year, I'm going to be a little disappointed that they ended up cutting him for nothing. If there ever was a legitimate trade offer for Dalvin Cook on the table because they were trying to, try to get more for the trade, I don't know, or if they were just trying to convince Dalvin to stay with the team at a lesser price, I don't know. But having said that, if they get nothing for him, I'm going to be a little disappointed about it.
Norpheus is wondering if there was a backdoor deal of a trade that they'd make it after June 1st to help with the money issues, and that still may be on the table, because we all heard during the draft the Dolphins were the ones, the trade partners, or at least one of them, and yet they took a running back in the draft. So who knows? I hope there was a backdoor deal and it comes to fruition here in a couple weeks.
But to your point about the production, it is going to be a downgrade in production. There's no question about that. And it's one of those deals where in the modern NFL, you almost have to accept that, yeah, the amount of production that Dalvin Cook offers you over what Alexander Mattison offers you, is that worth the $9 to $11 million it would cost to keep Dalvin Cook to get that extra production? And right now, where this team is, for me anyway, you've got other areas of need and other areas of money cost savings that you need to come up with that. Yeah, if you had the 2017 defense with Mike Zimmer as the defensive coordinator and you had this version of Kirk Cousins with Kevin O'Connell as the head coach and you could make the numbers work, sure, it would be great to keep the production that Dalvin Cook would give you. There's no denying that. But with how this team is currently structured, I'm sorry, you can't pay him that kind of money, I don't think.
Yeah, yep. It's yeah, pretty much. Sorry, my brain's absolutely fried. It'll be interesting to see how Kwesi goes about this, because it's one of his first really tough decisions.
I mean, yeah, if he goes the route of Harrison Smith and changes his mind and says, all right, yeah, I'll take a $6-7 million pay cut or whatever, reasonable number there is, I'd absolutely love to see Dalvin Cook on this team. I'm just saying that based on everything that he has said so far, I just don't see it happening. I'd love to be wrong. Don't tell my daughter I said that, by the way.
What are your predictions for the 2023 season?
I see about 10 or 11 wins on the high end. I see no fewer than 7 or 8 on the low end. So pessimistic version of me would say if all of the bad luck comes back, that we got all the good luck last year. Okay, even with all of that, there's no way you're winning fewer than 7 games. But I think 10 or 11 is a reasonable expectation for regular season wins. As far as what I would consider a successful season, to me, anything short of the divisional round of the playoffs is not a success. Just getting to the divisional round of the playoffs is kind of a meets expectations for me. But I think, we've known the schedule, we've known the opponents, and we now know the schedule, and there's some quirks to it. The first 7 weeks, you're just hoping to hang on to be 4-3. If you can find a way to only lose to Philly, San Francisco, and Kansas City and win the other 4 games before you hit this middle part of the season is very, very forgiving. But I would say a 10 or 11 win season is about a reasonable expectation, but it's the Vikings. They'll find a way to win a game that you didn't expect, like Buffalo last year. And they'll find a way to lose a game where it's just like, seriously, how did the Vikings go to Chicago or Atlanta and lose a game? Because as we all know, that's just what the Vikings do. Generally speaking, for the most part, they beat teams that they're better than. They lose teams that are better than them. And they generally go about 500 against teams they're equal against, and then they have one surprise win and one surprise loss. So I think 10 or 11 is about right.
Tyler, do you concur?
I think they'll win 9 games. One of the tough things about the Vikings being so good in those one-score games last year is it was like kind of just when you look at a broader set of data points and inflation. And it was way over expectations, and eventually you're going to regress to the mean. How hard are you going to regress to the mean is a tough part, but you're only going to get so quote unquote lucky. And luck is it's kind of a dirty word in this sense, because it's not luck as in you flipped a coin and you won the football game. It's luck in a general sense where you're not going to have 100th percentile outcome in those situations more often than not. and being undefeated in one-score games throughout the entirety of the season. I believe it was 11-0 or 12-0, and then the only one you lost was in the playoffs. Like, that's not going to happen consistently.
No,
like the Raiders were a bad football team, but they were like 2-8 in one-score games. You just make the Raiders 500. They're the 5 seed in the AFC. Like, so you're not talking about being exponentially off. Like, eventually you're going to regress to the mean, but how hard? How are you going to improve? And then the first place schedule is only 3 games, but when those 3 games are against the Eagles, 49ers, and Bengals, all 3 of which were in the Final Four last year,
and we play the fourth, to me, too.
Yeah, we play all 4 of the Final Four teams. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I am not trying to be a pessimist, but going 0-4 in that slate is a very real possibility because those are 4 tremendous football teams. Like,
no, I totally agree.
I think the absolute floor, that especially with how many young players we're counting on, like if they don't come through, the floor is 5-12. The ceiling, I think, is 11-6, and the most likely outcome is a fringe 500 team at 9-8.
No, the whole regression. I mean, here's the thing: in 2021, Zimmer's last season, they're basically the same team. The difference is that in 21, you hardly got any luck in one-score games, and in 22, you got all of it. You were basically a 9-10 win team in 2021 that was a couple wins short of that because, you didn't get some luck at end of games. You're basically a 9-10 win team last year, too. You just got a ton of luck. So this team isn't really – it's razor thin, the difference between the final year 8-9 of Mike Zimmer and last year's 13-win team. But – yeah, I mean, just going through the schedule off the top of my head, yes, you got the big 4. We talked about that. I think that if I'm being honest, I just think that another loss that they're going to come across would be in Denver on Sunday Night Football, traveling west and playing on Sunday night. We can talk about Kirk on primetime all we want, but realistically, you should probably adjust your thinking to saying we'll probably have to go into the season expecting to split with the Lions, as ridiculous as that may sound. For decades, it's always been, can we split with the Packers? And now it's, okay, it's not unreasonable to say that your expectation should be to split with the Lions. So that brings me up to 6 wins. And realistically, like I said a moment ago, they'll find a way. They should sweep Chicago, but is anybody 100% confident that the Vikings are going to go to Soldier Field? Mind you, finally, it's not in the middle of December or first part of January for the first time in a while, which is great. But, yeah, I could very easily see 6 or 7 losses on the schedule, and I could very easily see that the only 4 teams that they lose to are the big 4. That's why they play the games, because we don't play them on paper, so to speak. But no, I think 10 or 11 is probably the ceiling, so I would concur with what you got going on. Yeah, a 7 TD game from Kirk Cousins, that'd be the day.
That'd be something. But you talk about luck, and the Vikings have seen some bad luck. I remember 2016 when they were having to end up going on the scrap heap to find offensive linemen because every week one of them was getting knocked out for the season. As long as a good luck for the team is that everybody stays mostly healthy throughout the entire season. They did so last year. Part of that is the sports science department within the team and how the trainers and how they keep them healthy. But Vikings fans know things can go sideways real quickly.
Mm-hmm.
For the Vikings, going sideways out of nowhere? No.
I've got one last question for you.
Of course.
All right. I call this community that we're in Vikingsland. Why did you join this as a content creator?
Well, I've consumed sports talk radio, all my life, whether it was the flagship of KFAN or 1500 into 1500 ESPN, which is now into Score North. Love them or hate them, guys like Matthew Collar, love guys like Ted and Drew, you guys formerly of Climbing the Pocket and now of First and Scold. I just consume so much, and my family and friends are always just like, why do you listen to people talk about the Vikings? Why don't you do that? You talk to us about the Vikings all of the time. Why? Why don't you?
Ulterior motive. Go talk to your computer. Leave us alone.
Go talk into the ether and see if some people will respond to you that way. But it was just kind of one of those. In 2020, somebody needed to fill in one episode for one of their podcasts, so I joined, and then after that, joined them semi-regularly for the rest of that season. Last season started off just doing a contribution thing, and eventually, one of the co-creators over there was just like, you've got too much to just do one show a week. Do your own thing. Understand that it's a process, that you're not just going to turn on your computer and have 10,000 subscribers, for crying out loud. What's up, G-Mac? How you doing? So, having watched you guys for as long as I have and watched all of the other mainstream, quote unquote, into, YouTube content creators, was blessed to have networked and gotten in touch with guys like you and guys like Rap and Dave and GG Sports and Vikings Uncensored, just to name a few off the top of my head, to where, you see so many of these same people in all of these chats every episode, and it's just tons of fun talking about this team. We just want to see the Vikings win a Super Bowl just once before we die. Just 2 or 3 times would be cherry on top. We'll just take one at this point. We're so desperate for it. But to answer your question, it was just like, you know what? This could be fun, being on the other side, not just listening to people, to actually do it and sitting down and having conversations. The beautiful thing about the internet is, back in the day, you'd go to the bar and you'd have conversations with people as you're watching the games, or maybe a little before, a little bit after. Now you can do it 7 days a week if you want.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and multiple times a day even. Right, Tyler?
Yes. Multiple times a day. And you know what? If my dog would have let me get any sleep last night, I would be a lot more alert. But he decided, hey, Dad, I'm going to just start bleeding for 3 hours. Yay. Well, he's okay. Like that's really what's important.
Yes.
He's absolutely okay. He's napping next to me like a good boy. He's going to be excited that when I'm fully out of my office for the rest of the night. He doesn't care hanging up here very much.
All right. We're at the point in the show where I ask you, what's next? Tyler, what have you got coming up next?
I got a lot of stuff coming up. We're going to have a show on Wednesday. I have no idea what we're going to talk about yet, but that's also
Vikings.
That's okay.
It's the off season.
We're going to talk Vikings. Obviously, we got Connor was just on the show. Please go back and check that out. Connor is one of the best people in all of draft media. Not only is he just brilliant and knowledgeable, but he's just such a genuinely good person. And you don't get that kind of combination a lot in this business. And that was I wish we could have had him for longer, but we're both incredibly busy individuals. It did not happen that way. We're going to talk Vikings in some way, shape, or form on Wednesday. You can also check on Purple Daily on Draft with myself and Thor Nystrom of Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros. We talked about mini camp. We talked about way too early mock drafts, Za'Darius Smith. We talked about a lot of different things. I think maybe, Dave, what we'll talk about on Wednesday is kind of looking at the maybe do a projected 53 and some potential surprise cuts. Let's do that. Let's do that. I'm gonna get something up and going on Wednesday to kind of pair with it for Vikings Wire. And honestly, I'm running like a chicken with my head cut off all the time. And what was it? Kevin, one of my writers, said I'm like a hamster on a wheel jacked up on cocaine. And
nice.
that's kind of how I work, but that's okay. A lot of interesting stuff. A lot of good stuff coming up. We're going to take some time, and I'm looking to bring on some guests. I've got a few messages out, so we'll kind of see how those end up, and seeing if we can get some really cool guests on the show for like the doldrums of summer.
Cool. Justin, what have you got coming up forward on Purple and Gold for Days?
So I do a live show Tuesday nights with my compatriot Dave from Minnesota Sports Talk, and our guest tomorrow. We call the show Under the Lights. He came up with the name, and I think it fits because most of the time we have guests on. It's very rare that he and I just have a show together. And we have none other than Luke Braun joining us tomorrow night. That's at 6:30 Central Time. So that should be scheduled here tonight or first thing tomorrow morning. So hit the notification bell for that. But 6:30 Central Time tomorrow night. And I, like you, don't have the slightest idea, but I'm sure if Luke Braun's in the building, we can find something purple to talk about. One or two things. But in all seriousness, I usually drop 2 or 3 episodes a week, depending on the news. Obviously, it's a little slower right now, as we all know. We have to rack our brains to come up with stuff to keep you guys entertained, but we find a way to do that there. But tomorrow, what I got for sure is tomorrow night, 6:30 Under the Lights, special guest Luke Braun. And breaking news as it happens, I'll have a video drop for Dalvin Cook once that situation ever resolves itself. You guys list schedules for your show. Well, during the season, I usually go live on Monday nights, usually right before Monday Night Football, and pretty much always on Tuesday nights. And I usually drop preview episodes either Friday night or Saturday morning. And sometimes we just go live when we go live. So what you do, Blowfish, is you hit subscribe to First and SKOL Media. You hit that notification bell so that anytime an episode, whether it's a live or a pre-recorded, it pops right up on your device for you. And then you do the same thing on Purple and Gold for Days. How's that for some cross-promotion, Joe?
Vikings First and SKOL. You do that as well as subscribe to the podcast feed. Because here at Vikings First and SKOL, we've added podcasts that you don't see on YouTube. So to get that interaction over there, you've got to download the podcast. It's at any aggregator you have. We're doing a couple shows, one a week, where we're skulling with friends. This last week, we just learned about Jordan Addison's time at Pitt and his winning the Biletnikoff and how he'd go up to the trophy case of the 2 Biletnikoffs, put his hands there and go, I'm going to win this. Right? And he did that sort of deal. I wish we had a Lombardi in the building so he could do the same thing. I'm going to win this. I hope they get him one just to do that for the Vikings. We also have what I started last week, the daily opener, where I read to you in my dulcet tones, not getting exciting and loud, about the Minnesota Vikings news over the last 24 hours. And you want to know where the first place is I look for news? Tyler, can you guess?
This is a really tough one, Dave. There's only one place I could think of that you might be able to get your news, and that is VikingsWire.usatoday.com, where that you will not find a more comprehensive written outlet for the Minnesota Vikings that talks about the Vikings from literally every angle. We have a scheme guy, we have a news guy, we have a beat reporter, and then you have me, the hamster on a wheel jacked up on cocaine.
Yeah, and it's a great spot to get all sorts of stuff. Daily Norseman is too. We love our boys over there. But Vikings Wire, for being on it, they pump out stuff all the time. I suggest you hit them up. And Davey, I'm sorry you don't like Luke Braun. Luke Braun is a friend of the show, friend of mine. He is a great individual. And like he says, the kid you cheated off in math class. He is a math whiz. And he brings that part to it. But he loves the Vikings just as much as we do. And I suggest you check out he's got a whole Vikings history segment over on his Patreon, which is free, that you can check out those videos. They're absolutely awesome.
You should give him money, though, so he can feed his bunnies. And that is not a euphemism. He has bunnies.
He has 2 pet
Ziddy and Zoe.
Mm-hmm. But that wraps up the show for tonight. Justin knows this. What do we say?
SKOL Vikings!
SKOL Vikings, baby.
SKOL Vikings! Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Fornes and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!